Lights, camera, dissect. Welcome back to Midnight Reel Reviews.
He only went to the hospital to treat a hand injury but ended up being assaulted by a doctor. After regaining consciousness, Jin Mei felt something strange about the treatment process. The doctor hadn't just administered anesthesia, his behavior seemed off. Richard quickly explained that the anesthetic might cause hallucinations, urging Jin Mei not to overthink and to just rest at home. However, Jin Mei couldn't shake the feeling that something had happened to him at the hospital. Disturbing images of being assaulted kept flashing in his mind, though he couldn't recall the details. He picked up his underwear from the floor, but found no evidence. Trusting his instincts, he decided to report the incident to the police. First, he drove to a clinic to have his body examined by a doctor. The report confirmed that Jin Mei had engaged in intimate activity the previous night, but there were no signs of violent assault. Jin Mei took the report to the police and, under questioning, began recalling the events leading up to that night. Jin Mei, a single mother working at a gas station, had been enraged when her boyfriend stopped by to refuel with another girl in the car. The confrontation escalated into a physical fight, and her boyfriend shoved her onto the counter, causing a cut on her hand before leaving without a care. Jin Mei then went to the hospital alone to have the wound treated, where Dr. Richard was on duty. Seeing her injury, he offered to help. Despite the minor cut, Richard insisted on giving her an injection, calling it a sedative. He then administered another while she was unconscious. The officers were skeptical of Jin Mei's story, as Richard was a well-respected doctor in the small town. Jin Mei's reputation was tarnished, known for frequently changing boyfriends. The police assumed she was trying to exploit Richard's wealth and status. Still, they had to file her case since she made a report. At home, Jin Mei locked herself in the bathroom, frantically scrubbing her body. Despite her relationships, she couldn't bear the humiliation. The disturbing images persisted. Neither the police nor her family believed her, blaming her for seeking trouble. The next day, a veteran officer discreetly approached Richard, informing him of the report and asking for his account of the events. Richard, shocked, denied the accusations, claiming that Jin Mei had tried to seduce him, but that he had resisted. He asserted that others in his position would have succumbed. Reluctantly, Richard provided a blood sample for testing. After the officer left, Richard labeled another blood sample with his name and handed it over instead. The officer didn't question the switch, showing full trust in Richard. The DNA test results unsurprisingly didn't match Jin Mei's claims. The next day, the officer confronted Jin Mei publicly, accusing her of fabricating the story for personal gain. Humiliated, Jin Mei couldn't dispute the evidence and stormed into the police station in frustration. The chief, fed up, called the veteran officer. Jin Mei finally snapped upon learning of procedural lapses in the investigation. Silence her complaints. The chief asked Richard to provide a new sample under direct supervision. Surprisingly, Richard agreed without hesitation. He allowed the chief to oversee the nurse drawing his blood. This time, the process was strictly followed, but the results were the same. No match. Enraged, Jin Mei confronted the chief, but he warned her against making false accusations, threatening legal action. The case became a town scandal, with most residents siding against Jin Mei, accusing her of targeting Richard for compensation. Shunned by the community, she became a pariah, barred from entering local stores. She locked herself at home, consumed by depression. Only then did her father believe her story. Deciding to move the family out of town, he took Jin Mei to seek medical help. But the haunting images remained every time she received an injection. Meanwhile, Richard continued to thrive in the small town. Every day he swaggered into the bar as if nothing had happened, pretending the past didn't exist. Time flowed relentlessly and 2 years quickly passed. After undergoing therapy, Jin Mei finally recovered her mental and physical health. One day, however, a neighbor's child asked her son why they moved here. The son replied, "Because my mom was hurt, and nobody believed her. That's why we moved." As a mother, Jin Mei couldn't bear to see her son face such humiliation because of her. Determined, she decided to return to the small town to uncover the truth and clear her name for herself and her family. She marched to the town's police station and demanded the authorities reopen her case. However, the police stated that the case was closed, and without new evidence they couldn't proceed further. "If there's any chance, you must find a way to get his DNA sample," they advised. Jin Mei then approached Richard's assistant, hoping for help. The assistant sympathized with her ordeal, admitting that working for such a hypocrite had been no less miserable. Jin Mei argued that a man like Richard wouldn't stop at just one crime. There were likely other victims. The assistant suddenly recalled someone and discreetly handed Jin Mei a medical record at the hospital's back door. The file pointed to a girl who had visited Richard for a checkup and mysteriously disappeared afterward. Jin Mei tracked down the girl using the address in the file, but as soon as she mentioned Richard, the girl became visibly nervous, made an excuse, and shut the door. Meanwhile, a private investigator Jin Mei had hired successfully infiltrated the hospital. During an appointment with Richard, the investigator managed to collect a saliva sample, but the test results were unexpected. Richard's saliva was contaminated with glue, rendering the sample invalid. Despite their efforts, Jin Mei and the investigator hit a dead end out of options. They decided to take a risk. Late one night, the investigator informed Jin Mei that Richard was meeting someone at a motel. They might find evidence in his car. Jin Mei hurried over and the investigator unlocked Richard's car using his skills. Inside, they found a lipstick Richard had used. Nervous, Jin Mei accidentally honked the car horn as they left, but by the time Richard came out, they were long gone. Jin Mei quickly extracted a sample from the lipstick and sent it for DNA testing. This time, the results matched the DNA evidence collected years earlier, proving Richard's guilt. Armed with solid proof, Jin Mei returned to the police station. Moved by her persistence, the sheriff agreed to reopen the investigation. Richard was summoned to the station and asked to give a blood sample in Jin Mei's presence, boldly. He rolled up his sleeve and allowed the nurse to proceed. However, the first attempt yielded no blood, likely a faulty needle. On the second attempt, the nurse successfully collected a sample. If this test didn't match, the case would close permanently, and Jin Mei would have to publicly apologize to Richard. Shockingly, the DNA still didn't match. Jin Mei was devastated, unsure where things went wrong. Smug, Richard thought he was in the clear. But that same evening, another woman came forward, reporting a similar experience with Richard. Now, with two accusers, the police grew suspicious of sample tampering. They detained Richard at his workplace, taking hair and saliva samples directly under forensic supervision. This time, the DNA test confirmed Richard's involvement. The evidence proved he had been with Jin Mei. In court, Richard claimed their relationship was consensual and denied any wrongdoing. It was later revealed that Richard had planted someone else's blood in his arm using a hidden tube, allowing him to cheat the earlier tests. His excuse: he claimed too many women pursued him for his wealth and status, and he wanted to protect his family. Clearly, they came prepared. The results of the DNA test were still inconclusive. This revealed that the evidence Jin Mei obtained was fake. At this point, Jin Mei was on the verge of a complete breakdown. She didn't even know where things went wrong. Seeing Richard's smug expression made her furious. She thought the case would be closed, but then that evening, a girl came to the police station to file a report, just like Jin Mei's experience. She claimed Richard had assaulted her too, but she couldn't find any evidence. Now, with two accusations, the police started suspecting that Richard was fabricating his samples. Two victims had come forward, and they couldn't overlook this anymore. They forced Richard to be detained. Richard, at work, was stunned when detained by police. Forensic experts collected his hair and saliva, and the DNA test matched, proving his involvement with Jin Mei. He claimed their relationship was consensual and accused her of seduction. It was revealed that he used another person's blood, implanted in his arm, to falsify earlier tests, claiming it was to protect his family from opportunistic women. His excuses failed, and the jury unanimously found him guilty, based on a true story.
Your VIP seat awaits. Subscribe now, and let's relive every movie moment together.